there, and welcome to a special edition of Power Play, coming to you live tonight from the foyer of the House of Commons. I'm Bashi Capellos in Ottawa on this Monday night on Parliament Hill. This evening, back in session.
We certainly want to wish the Leader of the Opposition well in this very decisive and important week for him.
Will the Prime Minister finally reverse his inflationary deficits and taxes so Canadians can afford to eat?
The House of Commons returns with a tax rebate boost. In moments, we're going to talk to Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, then Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer on the policies and priorities taking shape in 2026. Plus, our front bench with Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benty will be here. That's all coming up this hour. First, though.
Mr. Speaker, the Canadian people deserve affordable groceries. Liberals might laugh that off, but they've given Canada the worst food price inflation in the G7.
We take very, very well the Leader's openness on working with us on legislation. Can he give us a date, just a date, the next words out of his mouth, give us the date where we can have third reading on the BIA?
In the spirit of solidarity, why won't they agree with the Canadian people that we should get rid of all the hidden taxes that they've imposed on groceries?
I know that it's a particularly challenging week for the Leader of the Opposition, but let me help him because today we have good news for Canadians, Mr. Speaker. It's called the Canada Grocery and Essentials Benefit.
That is what debate looked like in the House of Commons in the first question period of 2026. Much of that debate spurred on by an early morning announcement today from Prime Minister Mark Carney about the GST rebate and a one-time boost to it and then a protracted increase to it over the next 5 years. Let me show you exactly what I mean. The GST credit will double, a one-time top-up of this year, and that's how much a family of four will essentially be eligible to receive as a result of that. And then you've got 25%, a 25% increase for 5 years beginning in July of 2026. Now, this does have to go through the House of Commons, and it does have to be introduced as legislation. We spoke to Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne about that. Have a listen to our conversation. Hi, Minister. Pleasure to welcome you to our set here on the House of Commons. I appreciate
Happy
making
New
the
Year.
time.
I know it's
I know it feels late, but
it's still good.
Same.
It's still the time to say hello and wish you all the best for this. It's been a busy year for you as well.
Yes, it has, and we'll get right into it because it's going to be a busy year coming up as well. Starting off with this announcement from your government today on the rebate. Now, I was covering the Liberals back in 2022 when a version of this with the GST rebate was announced. Since then, grocery prices have gone up at a minimum by 10% from 2022 until now. If it didn't work then to address the root cause of what Canadians are dealing with at the grocery store, why will it now?
Well, it's very, very different. And trust me, we did the number. So first of all, you have a bump and a bridge. So the bump is like we look at what's the food price, the excess food price inflation since 2020, during the COVID period. That is about $782. That's what you would find as the excess food price that families have. So what we did, we say, people understand that we have a plan, Vision 2030. A lot of the things we're doing are going to pay dividend, but it's going to take a few years. So we say what we're going to do is that we're going to help people now. Because that's what young Canadians, seniors, families across the country, they say, give us a hand now. So that's the bump. You see the 50% increase this year. And then we say we're going to help with 25% increase on a going forward basis. So this is very meaningful for families. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of dollars in addition in the pocket of Canadians. And if you take a family with 2 kids, you're talking at $1,890 that they will receive this year. So and we met with the Canadian Food Bank representative, and if you look at their report in detail, they'll tell you that kind of money makes a huge difference for millions of families in Canadian. Actually, this is going to go to 12 million Canadians. So it's the bump and it's the bridge. So by the time that we come to 2030, the increase in the economy, the economic growth that we're driving is going to help Canadians, but in the meantime, they needed a bridge.
How can you be sure that that will be the case? So I did interview actually the CEO of the food banks before she presented to you. I know that there's a record number of Canadians last month who visited, and 30% of them are kids. She said a high portion of them are working. And in fact, I've done interviews with her over the course of a number of years where she said the same thing. I remember interviewing you, I believe it was fall of 2023.
You have a good memory.
I do, when you were saying explicitly to the grocery stores, you got to stabilize the prices or else. Again, it's not just low-income Canadians dealing with increases of grocery prices that far outpace the median rate of inflation. It's all Canadians. Your government so far has failed to address that increase in prices. Why is this going to be any different?
Well, we focus on the bump in the bridge, but what we're doing also is structural measures. So I did talk, for example, to the unions of farmers in Quebec, which you call the UPA, and asking them what are the structural issues. So, for example, you'd find, because we're a Nordic country, we import about 30% of our fresh produce in a year. When you come to the winter, it's about 80 to 90%. So that's why we say we need structural measures as well to help, because we want to have more food security in the country. So we said, okay, we are going to have a national food strategy. We're going to allow the immediate expenses for greenhouses because we need to produce more in Canada. We're going to put $500 million in our strategic response fund, when we created in light of the tariff, to say, okay, we're going to look at how can we package more food in Canada. How can we transform more food in Canada? How can we have abattoirs in Canada? Because there's a number of structural things in the system that you need to address. So it's not the short-term measure is because people say, we need a break now. So we answer to that. But at the same time, if you look at the announcement, the vast majority of the measure are structural measures, which we talk with the Farming Association across the country to say, what are the things that would make a difference so that we import less, we produce more, and by being a bit more resilient in Canada, you will be facing in a much better way the pressure you mentioned about food prices.
And I take that point, but a few years ago, you were saying that the structural issue was a lack of competition in the grocery sector leading to higher prices. You said you were talking to a foreign grocer
Indeed.
that might come right away. None of that ever materialized. The Conservatives are saying today there's actually other built-in costs beyond the ones around resilience that you mentioned. Taxes, industrial taxes, hidden food packaging costs. Will you take a look at any of those?
Well, listen, we're looking at all the levers, and you're right. I did call a number of them. There were structural issues why they were not coming in Canada. I'll tell you, for example, you had restrictive covenant in leases, which prevented, for example, a new entrant to come close to an established grocery store. We got rid of that. We made that illegal in Canada. So we took a number of measures.
So where are they?
Well, I mean, it takes time for them to, consider the Canadian markets, but, we're going to do what we can control. What I can control is to make sure that structurally we produce more food in Canada. Structurally, I would say package more food in Canada. Structurally, that we have a better supply chain. We've been talking with them and say, what are the issues that makes Canada food more expensive, apart from being a Nordic country, which, some people would understand. And you know why it matters is because otherwise we are dependent on imports from abroad, which are then dependent on the Canadian dollar value. They're dependent on weather events. They're depending on global market. If you look at sugar, if you look at, for example, the price of coffee, if you look at the price of beef, a lot of the calves go to the south of the border, then they come back in Canada. So
Sure.
how can we, so one measure, like I said, was immediate help for families, seniors, and young Canadians. The other one is structural. So that I would say is very different than what you look back at the time, because these structural measures will make us more resilient.
So what about
Plus, we need to bring more competition.
What about those taxes, like the industrial carbon tax, like the food packaging costs due to plastics regulations? Is all of that up for review? And I ask because in the past, Liberals have reflexively said no, that link that Conservatives are making is false. And yet, just this morning, I heard the Prime Minister tout the benefits of increasing affordability thanks to getting rid of the carbon tax. Another thing Liberals frequently said on this program would not affect affordability at all.
Well, we took a number of measures. You're quite right. I mean, if you look at the number of measures we've done to support Canadians, you talk about the dental care program, talk about farmer care, you're talking about early learning and child care. I mean, there's a number of things to help Canadians, but the thing that I heard most, and probably you as well, when you talk to Canadians, I think food and shelter is the thing that comes to mind most, because food is something that you face, like, the price of food is every day or every week, the rent is every month. So we're trying to really look at, if you look at the disposable income of a family, the first thing is about their shelter, then it's about food, sometimes cars would come first, then you talk about cell phone bills, you talk about student loans. So we're looking at the different structural costs that a family would have typically, and how we can address that. So
that's why I'm asking about taxes. To be clear, that's my question. Are you going to consider a reduction in other costs that contribute to food?
Today is a milestone. I can tell you, you look at this measure, this is I would say, I don't want to say historic because I choose the word, but it's a very significant measures in terms of the tax break we're giving to Canadians. I mean, the first one was the tax cut, but this tax break is going to 12 million Canadians.
Yeah, that's not all Canadians who are buying food, though, to be clear, who are also faced with these increased costs.
Well, that's why, but this is money in their pockets, so they can use it for food, they can use it for other things. But the reality is that this is a very big structural change in order to help people at a time of need, whilst the logic we have with the Prime Minister when we talk is that we understand, we're the second fastest growing economy, we're attracting investment. This is all nice. But if you talk to my mother, she would say, what about now? And this is really the thing we say, okay, we heard you. We heard Canadians, we heard students, we heard seniors. They say, you need to do something now. People get it. Our Vision 2030, they say, by 2030, you'll have all these investments, more work, more growth, more GDP per capita. This is all nice, but people are saying, what about now? And that's why we're trying to do both. There's a bridge and there's a boost at the same time.
I understand those points. My question was about more structural possibilities with additional reduction of cost, but I got to move on because I only have a minute left, and I want to ask about one other thing. Affordability, and you mentioned cars, right?
Yeah.
Chinese electric vehicles, I've heard the way in which your government is now talking about this change to allow some in, that it will allow for a more affordable market for Canadians. When I interviewed you in March of last year, so President Trump was already there. President Trump was already there. The trade war had already been launched. He had threatened all those tariffs. You said, no way are we getting rid of those tariffs on EVs. In this case, you have China, who does not respect the rules. They're dumping products here and cheap products, and therefore that would be hurting our Canadian economy and industry. Why has your government's position changed so dramatically when the conditions surrounding it have not?
It's very simple. Well, I would say the world has changed. In a few months, the world has changed dramatically. Our neighbor to the south has changed. I mean, I would say the speed, scope, and scale of change in the world is quite unprecedented. We just came from Asia. When the Prime Minister was in Asia, I was in the Middle East with him in Europe. And some would go back to 1945. Some would go back to the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's geopolitics, geoeconomics, supply chain, it's technology, AI, and quantum. So all of these change requires you to be humble and to say, well, the world is changing at a speed, and our viewers understand that. There's so many things changing so rapidly that we had to pivot. We have to take the world as it is and being pragmatic in order to support Canadian industry.
But the world was that way in March of 2025. I mean, the president had already threatened all the tariffs. Some of them had even come into effect. He had been the president for 3 months, and you had a very principled stance about this, and those principles appear to have completely changed.
I would say, with respect, the world was not there yet. I mean, the world has evolved since the time you and I talked about that last time. I would say a few months has really changed. I mean, you just have to look what happened in Switzerland. We were all there. I think people realize now that more resiliency, diversifying market, building new partnership is essential for Canada's prosperity and our sovereignty. This is not an ordinary time. This is a time where all Canadians need to shoulder up what we're facing. And I've, like I said, Vacha, I've rarely seen in this country such a sense of patriotism, of unity, of willing to work with us and the Prime Minister to say, this is a new world. We are Canadian. We're proud of our heritage. We're proud of our values. I'm very confident about the future, but that's why we need to stick together in these tough moments.
I'll leave it on that note. Minister, a pleasure as always. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.
That was Federal Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, and we do have some pretty sad news to convey to you tonight, just breaking on our watch here tonight, that former Liberal Cabinet Minister Kirsty Duncan has passed away at the age of 59. She battled cancer for a number of years. She was an MP from 2008 to 2025, representing a riding in the Greater Toronto area of Etobicoke North. She served in the portfolios of sport and science in the Trudeau cabinet between 2015 and 2019. She did not run in this latest election, but we are receiving, as I said, word tonight at the age of 59 that she has passed away. Melanie Joly, the industry minister, just actually commented on Ms. Duncan's passing at a press conference standing next to Ontario Premier Doug Ford, so we'll play that clip for you now.
I just learned the passing of Kirsty Duncan, who's my former colleague.
Right.
Yes. So, of course, I would like to acknowledge the passing of my former colleague, Kirsty Duncan, former Minister of Science and an MP. She was a dear friend, and I know this is a difficult moment for her loved ones and for many of my colleagues also back in Ottawa. So sending lots of love and strength to all of them.
That's Industry Minister Melanie Joly reflecting on the passing of former Cabinet Minister Kirsty Duncan. Certainly our condolences and our thoughts go out to her friends and family. We're going to take a quick break here on Power Play. We've got a lot more coverage coming up of the return of the House of Commons. Our front bench will join me in a few moments. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair and Rob Benzie. And up next, Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer.
I think this Parliament can work. I think Canadians expressed themselves only last April, the end of April, on the Carney plan, on the plan to diversify trade markets, to create opportunities, to attract $1 trillion of investment and to make life more affordable. Unless Mr. Poilievre continues with his obstruction, there's no way that that plan should not receive the approval of this Parliament. Mr. Poilievre has to get out of the way and allow his MPs to vote on an ambitious crime-fighting agenda, to vote on a plan to grow our economy.
Hi there and welcome back to a special edition of Power Play, live from the foyer of the House of Commons. That was Government House Leader Steve McKinnon talking about the legislative sitting ahead. This is the first day of the House of Commons here in 2026. Now to get the opposition's view, we're joined by Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer. Hi, Mr. Scheer. It's good to see you as always.
Great to see you back.
Thank you very much for making the time. I wanted to start off on the question of what they're announcing today, the prospect of legislation to bring forward this boost to the GST rebate. If the legislation is focused on that kind of straight up and down what they described today, is that something the Conservatives will support?
Well, what we said is, as you say, if they bring a clean bill to Parliament, just what they announced today, then we'll allow it to pass. We've seen in the past Liberals make an announcement, but then when they bring the legislation through, there's some clauses in there, as they did with their budget, where they tried to write themselves the power to exempt ministers from other legislation aimed at protecting Canadians. But if they come to the House with this, we'll allow it to pass. Now, that doesn't mean that we think this is the best approach. This is a temporary measure. It's something that Justin Trudeau tried. They are recycling old Trudeau-era policies that not only didn't help with affordability, but prices kept rising. We've called on them to do permanent things that will permanently help bring food prices down, eliminating the industrial carbon tax, the fuel standards tax. Those are all things that stack together on top of each other and drive up food costs. Repealing those measures, those Liberal laws, would be a permanent fix, or at least a permanent alleviation. What they're announcing today is temporary.
So a couple of things. It is temporary in that it'll only last 5 years. It's different from what the Liberals did in 2022, only insofar as that was a temporary doubling over 6 months. This is a doubling this year, plus the 25% over 5 years. On the idea of other things that they could do to bring down the overall cost of food, I put a lot of what you just mentioned to Finance Minister Champagne a few moments ago, and he didn't rule any of it out. Are you sure that in the aggregate, all of what you said will actually decrease food prices? Because you also said that about the consumer carbon price. In the inflationary, food inflation kept going up.
Well, it kept going up because Liberals kept running massive inflationary deficits. Inflation is always a monetary phenomenon. When governments expand the money supply, when they borrow vast sums of money and wash it through the system, it's going to cause inflation. That's why this will be so temporary. If you have me back in a year or two, even 6 months, I guarantee you those grocery prices will still be going up because the government has not. Mark Carney has not changed course from Justin Trudeau's inflationary approach to the economy and to monetary policy. Now, what we are saying is that, like the carbon tax, when the government tried to take credit out, when the Liberals fought against scrapping the carbon tax, they tried to take credit for inflation easing for a period of time when the consumer carbon tax was finally taken off. That's something that Conservatives will remind Canadians about and remind Liberals about. If they get rid of the fuel standard tax, that will be a measurable decline. Right now, it adds 7 cents a litre to the cost of gas. Every vegetable, every pound of beef has to get transported from somewhere to a grocery store, those extra fuel taxes add to those costs. I saw you put the question to Minister Champagne about the packaging tax. The Liberal, he talked about making Canada more resilient by getting more packaging done in Canada. Well, the Liberals have a ban on using plastic in packaging that our other countries don't have to face. So there's lots of measures that we're calling on them that would have a much more permanent effect on grocery prices. What they've announced today, it means the government has to borrow more money to pay for it. And as inflation continues to go up, it's going to be evaporated. And when we're talking about the scope of it, let's not forget, this is about one trip to the grocery store worth of relief. Under this Liberal government, under Mark Carney, Canadians, working family, is going to pay over $17,000 a year just in groceries. This isn't the fix that Canadians were looking for.
But the scope of your fix that you're talking about, that's my question to you. I take your criticism of what the government is proposing. But if you get rid of the clean fuel standards, for example, if you get rid of what you describe as additional food packaging costs, what they talk about as plastics regulation, how much cheaper is food actually going to be? Because when you talk about the inflationary component of government spending, you've also today frequently invoked a comparison with the United States and how food is cheaper there. Well, their deficits are, on a proportionate basis, far greater than Canada's. So if your argument were true, would their food inflation not also be greater too?
Well, Canada does not the Canadian dollar is not the world's reserve currency. So the U.S. economy is protected from inflation in a much different way. Oil isn't settled in Canadian dollars. International through the IMF and World Bank isn't settled in American dollars.
They're spending so much more than ours.
That is true. But other countries around the world buy so much government debt and hold on to so much actual cash in all around the world. Canada doesn't get the benefit of being the world's reserve currency. Now, if we are talking about what we could do to strengthen the purchasing power of dollars, when foreign investment comes into Canada to, say, build a pipeline, or when other countries are wanting to buy our Canadian oil and gas, then that strengthens the Canadian dollar. And that means when Canadians go to buy a banana from South America or fresh fruits and vegetables in the winter, that their purchasing power will be stronger. Those are much more permanent ways to address the inflation crisis. Borrowing money, stacking that, increasing the deficit, to provide this benefit. Not only is it temporary, but the scope of it is is comparatively to what Canadians are spending on groceries, not the relief they were looking for. What we are talking about is leaving that money back in the economy in the first place, not to tax it in the first place with the industrial carbon tax. It took us a while to get the Liberals to agree with us on the consumer carbon tax. Maybe they'll change their mind on the industrial carbon tax, but that adds to the cost of fertilizer, it adds to the cost of farm equipment.
I know, but that's the same argument you made around the consumer carbon price, right? That, I know, but it didn't. But food is not cheaper. Like you guys said, we're gonna take it away, and it's gonna be cheaper at the grocery store, and that wasn't the case. You didn't say if we got rid of all these other 15 things, that will happen too. Your promise was very singular.
No. If you go back and remember, Pierre Poilievre was the only person, the only federal politician anyway, who was raising the alarm bell on inflation, saying that the way the Liberals were approaching the deficits, how they were forcing the Bank of Canada to flood the economy with brand new cash, brand new money without any economic growth to back it up, that was going to cause inflation. He has been talking about a whole suite of issues that affect food prices. Yes, absolutely, the carbon tax added to that.
I mean, the slogan was axe the tax.
It was also fix the budget. It was also fix the budget, which was a big part of that. And even the Bank of Canada governor admitted that the carbon tax was a big culprit in inflation. Obviously not the only culprit. A huge part of the inflationary pressures that Canadians are forced to pay is when governments borrow massive amounts of money, increase the money supply, more dollars chasing fewer goods or the same amount of goods will lead to price increases. That's basic math, it's basic economics, and these Liberals refuse to acknowledge that. And what we're saying is with their announcement today, we'll let it pass because it is something. There will be, but when working families are paying over $17,000 a year in grocery prices, thanks to 10 years of Liberal inflationary policies, this maybe provides relief for a week's worth of, one trip to the grocery store's worth of relief. It's not what they're looking for. It's definitely not permanent.
Something else that I was, when I was reading about what would permanently impact food prices that kept jumping out at me was supply management, because there are two different studies I read. One said between $300 and $444 a year could be cut if that was amended. Another said $600 a year for Canadian families. You yourself, I remember when you were leader of the party, and your party more largely has never even thought about addressing that. Why not, if that would have a permanent impact?
Well,
is it political expediency?
No, every time someone brings up the idea, the first question is, well, how do you buy out if that were to be contemplated, it would come with massive costs in the front end. And there's so many things we can do right now. Like we could reduce that, we could eliminate the industrial carbon tax today without having to compensate anybody.
Would that save me $600 a year at the grocery store?
These are all a suite of packages. If we started working back towards balanced budgets, if we started to strengthen the Canadian dollar by approving large energy projects, so more foreign investment was converting their dollars into Canadian dollars, that would give everybody more purchasing power. If we got rid of the industrial carbon tax, if we got rid of the food packaging tax, the fuel standard tax, those are things that you don't have to compensate anybody else for. So that's the low-hanging fruit. That should be a no-brainer. It took the Liberals 10 years to finally admit that we were right on the carbon tax. I'm hopeful that they'll finally agree with us on the other ones.
And
too.
I remember your party very much sort of, combating the Liberal ideology around that carbon tax by saying, like, you're doing something that isn't good for Canadians just because you're ideologically wedded to it. That's why I put supply management to you as well. Like, if you're politically wedded to an idea that ultimately would have a better impact on Canadians at their experience at the grocery store, like, aren't you doing the same thing?
No, because there's no benefit to the carbon tax. There's no benefit to it. There are definitely benefits
it was 9% of the reduction by 2030 of the emissions in Canada.
Look, I mean, even the Liberals admitted that it did. Canada fell to the bottom of the pack in the OECD countries when it comes to climate change. That's not my talking point. That's not what Conservatives are saying. That's what independent analysis from nonpartisan observers just by doing calculations. So there's no benefit to that. There clearly is a benefit to many communities, many producers with the supply management system. What we're saying is, rather than looking for solutions or ideas that might cost a lot of money on the front end, let's do the things that don't cost government or taxpayers a cent, because we're leaving that money back in Canadians' pockets. And by strengthening the Canadian dollar, by working back towards balanced budgets, then we're not just talking about grocery prices, we're talking about all prices. We can stabilize the cost of living in Canada. That's something that Liberals just refuse to do.
One final question for you about the upcoming leadership review. I was looking back at results from other leaders. Stephen Harper in 2005, close to 85%. Does Mr. Poilievre need to get a number like that to remain to retain the confidence of the party?
I'm not going to prejudge or predict. I believe that we're going to get a good result. I've spoken to members of caucus, members of our party. They recognize that with Pierre, we achieved historic levels of support. We broke 40% for the first time in the modern Conservative Party history. We won seats all across the country in areas that nobody ever thought we could win. I'll bet you, I understand you're coming to convention. I guarantee you're going to meet people that have never been to a convention before, because I met people during the campaign that never voted Conservative before. They did because of Pierre's inspirational leadership. We're going to build on that, and we were going to come out of this convention more united than ever. With respect, is that the pitch? You almost won? Are you unwilling to provide any kind of number because you're not sure if you'll be able to meet it? No. I defer to the members. We are a grassroots party, and we let them make the decisions. When you think about what the Liberals had to do to win, I know I've had this conversation before, and we are Conservatives. We hold each other accountable, and we all recognize that the approach to the next election will have to have some elements that are different, but we don't want to lose what we've got. It took the Liberals barge pulling a sitting prime minister who didn't want to go. They had to dump their leader. They then had to disavow policies that they had said were core values that were part of their DNA. They had to completely abandon them, do a 180 in order to hang on to power. So yes, we have to look at what we need to do to get to the next election, but let's not forget that it took the Liberals making desperate measures. The advantage the Liberals have is that they are unburdened by principle. So they can make these kinds of pivots in campaigns, pretend to be something that they're not. Conservatives, we have core principles that we believe in that form the pillar of our party and our movement. And Pierre has been the champion for that. He's also been the champion for the working class in this country who are tired of inflation robbing the power of their paychecks, tired of the crime that's plaguing our communities. And he's the only one that's committed to doing something about it. So we're confident that we're going to take that positive message to the Canadian people in the next election and be successful. Okay, I'm out of time. I appreciate your time. We'll see you at the convention. I'm sure we'll speak again. I appreciate it, Mr. Scheer. Thank you. Thank you very much. See you in Calgary. You bet. Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer. We'll take a quick commercial break, and our front bench will join me on the other end of that break, live here from the House of Commons. Back in a moment on Power Play.
Are you considering calling a snap election this spring?
I'm going to go back to the previous answer. What we're focused on is solutions for Canadians. So today's announcement, we'll be tabling legislation soon.
This feels like many days we spent on the campaign when I was covering the campaign. Lots of grocery stores, lots of affordability. So you're not considering a spring election?
I don't. You can't draw that conclusion at all.
Tell me that.
Well, of course we're not. We're not. We're focused on results for Canadians.
Welcome back to Power Play. The Prime Minister eventually saying there that there won't be a spring election, but there certainly is some speculation here in Ottawa that the opposite could be true, given a host of things, including the announcement from the Prime Minister made at that grocery store this morning to double the GST rebate this year and then increase it by 25% in each of the next 5 years, starting in July. That will require some legislation, but the Liberals do believe it's a political winner for them as well. Let's talk more about that as the House of Commons returns for 2026. With our front bench, joining me here in the foyer, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. And remotely, we've got former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt here. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. Next to her, that is Tom Mulcair, CTV's political analyst and former NDP leader. And finally, Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie rounds us out tonight. Hi, everybody. Very good to see you. Brian, I'm going to start with you. I know the Prime Minister eventually there said no election on the horizon, but it has felt like that over the past few days, and in particular with this type of announcement, which is very different from the other kinds of announcements the government has made so far, and even felt very much like something you might hear from former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Sure, but I think a few things. I mean, in the bubble, we may have a little bit of cynicism creeping up, and the fact that the Prime Minister and the government are trying to address affordability, we see it as something that is a political ploy and he must have some strategy behind it. I mean, it can be as simple as the idea that people are going through a very tough time when it comes to affordability. It can also be, if we want to insert a little bit of cynicism, it can also be that there's polling that suggests affordability is definitely still one of the top priorities, top concerns of Canadians. So just based on that, you can say, if you really want to have the cynicism at the heart of it, that they're trying to address that because polling demonstrates that's on Canadians' minds. They're definitely on the other top issue of trade with the U.S., which is obviously something, and the economy, which is obviously something that I know is on a lot of Canadians' minds based on polling. So politically speaking, you can obviously make an argument that they're doing this for an election. He came around to say no. I mean, I feel for him a little bit in the sense that if you are even thinking about it, you just say flat out no, and then if eventually you do it, you kind of have to go back on your word. That's annoying. Then he's probably thinking to himself, well, I'm not really thinking about it. He could be thinking to himself, I should say, that I'm not thinking about it, but I don't want to sort of completely shut the door. And then I think he just came around as somebody that's still only, a year or so into politics, kind of came around and said, okay, I'm going to shut the door here because clearly this is about to become a thing. So he did probably the right thing from a political point of view of saying, no, that's not one of the things we're thinking about.
Yeah, I think a couple of things, Tom, could be true at the same time, as Brian points out, right? Like it could be something that actually does address issues around affordability, let's say, but it also could be, if this were Doug Ford writing a check or Premier Legault writing a check, I don't know if anyone would have hesitancy to say, like, oh, there's an election coming.
Yes, I agree exactly with that. And, he's learning from the best. I think Legault is the all-time champion, frankly, because he gave $500 just before the last election to everybody. And he said, and if I get in, you get another $500 before Christmas. And he did. It ruined his budget, but he got in with a huge majority. So there is that. I'm sorry to go to something so deeply personal, but I've never heard Mark Carney ever stutter. And in both of those answers, he started stuttering and was trying to maybe remember the answer they told him to give instead of saying yes or no. And it wasn't working because a second question came that basically boxed him in. So he finally said, nah, we're not even thinking of it, which of course isn't true because Brian's completely right. You're always thinking of it, especially in a minority government situation. Yeah. So I think that they're learning, like I say, from the best, that a good way to get votes is to buy those votes with people's own money, which is exactly what he's proposing to do here. I mean, $800 check to a family with 2 kids, hey, that's not chump change, that's real money. And I think that the Conservatives are going to be very frustrated with that because they have their whole analysis of the big picture of the economy. That's what they have to do and all this other stuff. Carney's saying, no, I'm just going to send them checks. So I don't know if there's going to be an election, but I do know that he's setting it up so that the main Liberal themes could be there. And I'll just add very, very briefly, One of the themes will be national unity. He set the table for that in a speech on the Plains of Abraham last week. And it's a fight that he's not afraid to have with the separatists who are feeling their oats, but their election's not till October. So if he gets to go before, he gets to use them as a bit of a scarecrow. And I'm anxious to see if that's part of their thinking. The Liberals have always owned the national unity debate.
Lisa, even if it's not necessarily about an election, I think, there could be a good policy reason for this, but there's politics too, right? If you look at polling, his own personal numbers far exceed the Liberal Party's numbers. They are still neck and neck with the Conservatives. And when you break that down by issue set, affordability is still very much something that Canadians support the Conservatives on. I would imagine this is also going to be used to blunt some of that in the session.
I think you're right. It was interesting to me, the demeanor of the House Leader and Minister of Transport, Steve McKinnon, because he was quite, I would say, punchy. He said, I got a lot of legislation to get through, and we're going to get through it all. And hopefully the Conservatives will get out of the way. I mean, that's pretty strong language, not wanting to have any opposition. But what I'm also reading into it is, we're going to put stuff out there, Liberals, and if the Conservatives don't like it, go ahead, vote against it. We're not afraid of an election. So I would expect to see a lot of confidence votes this spring that the Liberals really aren't afraid of at all, because if they happen to fall and go to the polls, gosh, their leader's pretty popular and Donald Trump's a bad man. So that's going to be the election in May, maybe.
Minister McKinnon is literally 1 foot away from me right now, so we should just pull him
Give him
on.
my love.
Yeah, I will. Benzie, last word to you on this.
Yeah, I mean, Carney was here in Toronto today after that Nepean grocery store campaign event. He was at another campaign event with Premier Doug Ford, having pizza at a Etobicoke Pizza Nova shop, where Ford told us just now that he paid for the pizza. And Carney had 2 slices and Ford only had 1. But it speaks to the Prime Minister shoring up what had been a problematic little bump in their relationship because of the Chinese EV stuff last week. Ford was quite outspoken, and I think Carney understands that is an important relationship for him to have. Ontario is the most important electoral prize in an election that may or may not come this spring, and I think that he was careful to say the right things to the Premier. Went to his house before and after their pizza lunch. They were chatting there. So I think if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And it does feel like we're headed toward an election. The Davos speech certainly sounded like one.
Bashi, can I very quickly say that Benzie managed to call that meeting between Ford and Carney the pizza parley, and I think that even just that deserves an award, frankly.
Very good, very good.
Thanks,
He does deserve one. Yeah, every week we've got a new great piece of writing from Benzie to talk about. I'm going to take a quick commercial break. We've got more to talk about with the front bench on the other end of that break, including the latest salvo from U.S. President Donald Trump towards Canada. We're back in a moment here on Power Play, live from the House of Commons.
Yesterday, I had a cordial, lengthy conversation with U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Jamieson Greer. We had an opportunity to discuss the commitment that Canada made in the CUSMA agreement 6 years ago, as did Mexico and as did the United States, not to enter into free trade discussions with countries that do not have a market economy. I reiterated that remains our position. That is not at all the context of the recent visit to China. Ambassador Greer and I discussed the opportunity to get together probably over the next few weeks and talk again later this week in the context of the CUSMA review.
That's the federal minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, Dominic LeBlanc, telling reporters what he communicated to his counterpart, USTR Jamieson Greer, after this weekend. U.S. President Donald Trump posted to social media essentially saying that if Canada were to pursue a free trade agreement with China, that he would levy 100% tariffs on everything Canada sends to the United States. Here to talk a little bit more about that back and forth, or here back, I should say, to talk about that is our front bench. We've got Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Benzie, I'll start with you because you did just come off of that meeting between the Prime Minister and Premier Ford and Melanie Joly, the Minister of Industry, where this, friction had emerged over what deal had been arrived at with China. Very interestingly, since the U.S. President Trump made that threat without any details other than the post, the government has really been downplaying the significance of what this agreement with China is about. What do you make of that?
I mean, they are downplaying it because it isn't that major a thing. I mean, bringing in 49,000 EVs at 6.1% tariff in order to get China to reduce tariffs on canola is not exactly a free trade agreement that I think. But I think President Trump, who has his own domestic issues, obviously with civic unrest in Minnesota and problems with affordability in his own country, is looking for something to distract people. I'm not sure, Vashi, that trade with Canada is such a great channel changer for Americans, because most Americans take Canada for granted and think of us as just their polite, quiet neighbor to the north, and they're comfortable with that. But I guess Mr. Trump, for reasons only his psychiatrist can know, is doing what he is doing. And I think that the government is smart to not take every tweet or Truth Social post as an edict or an executive order. Remember, we're going to have the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on the previous tariffs that he imposed unilaterally pretty soon. And when that happens, I think we're going to maybe find that his tariff policy will have to change, because the Congress has to have a say in trade policy. It's never worked like this before. It's this unilateral imposition of tariffs or threats of tariffs over a tweet. I mean, it's absurd, really. And most of the time, he is just spouting nonsense. He doesn't actually follow through. We're still waiting for the 10% additional tariffs he was going to impose last summer. Remember that?
Yeah, after the Reagan ad, and then that never materialized. And there were really no details until Scott Bessent went on a Sunday show, Tom, and said, this is actually only if they end up pursuing a formalized free trade agreement. Even Trump's position himself, like a few days ago, he was clipping right after the deal was arrived at, saying, this isn't a big deal. And in a few days later, obviously a very different position on social media. What is your view of how to navigate that?
Well, the navigation includes the Davos speech, because that's what happened between Trump saying good for Canada if they're able to get a trade deal with China, and Trump saying they're going to get 100% tariffs because they got a trade deal. Bessent was using the life buoy sent his way by Dominic LeBlanc, essentially saying, you guys must have thought we were going to have a free trade deal with China. Not at all. That's in Kuzma. We would never do that. So everybody just jumped on that and said, okay, we'll forget about the crazy guy with the orange hair just said, we're just going to move on to something else. I think that that's exactly where it's going to stay. I think that Trump was incredibly embarrassed. I mean, I know this is going to come as a total shock. He's got a bit of an ego. And for him to watch that heartfelt, serious, long standing ovation for Carney, and then him showing up with his 19 members of some cabal that are his peace council and a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, and that's his answer to the United Nations. It fell so flat, and it looked so bad, in particular, compared to what Carney was able to accomplish in Davos. Yeah, I think there was a lot of personal frustration there, and just lashing out is the only thing that he knows how to do. But I think the cooler heads will prevail. Doesn't mean that we're out of the woods with regard to the renegotiation of Kuzma, but I think that those same cooler heads are going to get us through that as well.
It feels like the bigger risk might be moving ahead, Lisa, if they decide to greatly open, let's say, the market to Chinese investment, like the Chinese companies to come into this auto sector. A couple of the delegates, the more serious representatives of Trump, seem to indicate that would be a greater concern to them.
It is. And, this back and forth is exhausting, and you really can't follow the bouncing ball all the time. But I kind of try to see the through line on all of it. And I think the message that I'm getting is that when it comes to steel, when it comes to lumber, when it comes to autos, and when it comes to goods that have their origination in China that are manipulated in a way in Canada and then sent to the United States, those seem to be the four things that are really of concern for the Trump government. And as a result, they're the ones that I'm paying most attention to. Everything else is a lot of threatening and a lot of posturing, but they've never, ever, ever ceded any kind of ground on any of those four things. For me, those are really important to our economy writ large. So I can understand the seriousness that Minister LeBlanc's taking to him, the Prime Minister, because these are serious matters. The rest of it, it's a sideshow, unfortunately, that we're all stuck watching. And even now, Vashi, Mr. Trump has tweeted out that because South Korea has not passed the free trade deal quickly enough that he negotiated, he's increasing their tariffs today as well. So it's all tariffs everywhere, all the time for everyone.
And it does feel like, Brian, every time there's other stuff going on that is to the president's detriment, there's focus on, for example, in this case, Minneapolis or elsewhere, that the tariff threat somehow materializes. But he's climbed down now, on Greenland. He's climbed down on the 10% additional tariff for Reagan. So there's got to be something instructive about that.
I agree completely. I agree with my colleagues. I think they made wonderful points. And look, even if it is something that kind of distracts from some of his domestic issues. On top of that, it's kind of the way he negotiates as well. In his mind, you kind of just throw everything at the wall. You're unstable. You say things are going to be worse than they really are. You say you're going to basically attack all with tariffs, and then you kind of come back on it. So whether it's all these things at once probably is the case, and it's a question of degree. I agree with Tom as well. The Davos speech probably got to his ego a little bit, and he made him a little more prone to be ready to do this tactic that he does for negotiating purposes, for distraction purposes, and target Carney and Canada. But at the same time, what is Canada to do? I mean, we were last week talking about the need for red lines on Greenland. What Carney said, I certainly believe is true. So saying that and trying to organize middle powers is something that would be responsible for us to do. And one last point, I mean, I don't think this is what the Carney government is doing, but nevertheless, it could be one of the outcomes. If you want to go to the table for the CUSMA renegotiation and have any sort of leverage, kind of this implicit message is like, listen, if you're not going to be the partner that you've been in the past or a productive partner moving forward, we're going to have to look elsewhere. And that may include places you're not very excited about or for various reasons you don't want us to do. Whether that's even true or not, to what extent that's true or not, that implicit message might be one of the only things the Trump administration might say to themselves, okay, we got to deal with Canada because we don't want more of this stuff. So look, this is the kind of trying to make the best of a bad situation, and I think the Carney government is trying to balance all these things. And unfortunately, we have somebody that's pretty unstable with what they're going to say in Trump, and I don't think it's going to get any different or any better moving forward.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the discussion. Our front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Thanks, everyone. I'll take a quick break. We're back with more Power Play after that break. Welcome back to Power Play from Parliament Hill. We did want to once again convey to you some sad news tonight, the passing of former cabinet minister and MP for Etobicoke North, Kirsty Duncan. She passed away at the age of 59. She had battled cancer for a number of years. We're up here on Parliament Hill, so we've been talking to MPs from all sorts of different parties tonight, and all of them have been conveying, their real sadness at her passing, and certainly their condolences to her, her family, her colleagues, and her friends. We pass on our condolences and our thoughts here at CTV as well to all of Kirsty Duncan's family and friends. Certainly, her loss is a big one. We have a lot more coming up tonight on CTV News Channel. Of course, more news of the day, including the big announcement from the federal government. The Prime Minister this morning announcing a one-time top-up to the GST rebate, and then over 5 years, a boost to it as well. More reaction tonight on CTV News Channel. I'll leave Power Play there. I'm Vashi Kapelos. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good one.